Good morning. This is the Colorado Energy and Carbon Management Commission. It is Wednesday, March 12th. It's 9:01. This is our business agenda. We will start with a roll call of commissioners.
Thank you, Commissioner Ackerman,
There.
Commissioner Cross, Commissioner Mesner,
Here.
Commissioner Oath,
Here.
Commissioner Ray,
Here.
Commissioner Robbins.
Here.
Mr. Chair, you have 6 commissioners present.
Great. Welcome, everybody. Good to see folks. Energy and Carbon Management Commission is underway. With that, we turn to commissioner comments. Does any commissioner have comments? Seeing none, we move to public comment. Before we identify public commenters, I would note for the record that the public commenters that have signed up are familiar to me. It looks like these are the folks that have commented in the past on the secret stash OGDP, which is currently pending for later in the month. We also have afforded all public comment on that OGDP, and so the public comment period is over. So we're not taking further public comment on that. I also would note that the other matter on our agenda today is the produced water rulemaking, and we've afforded a ton of public comment on that, and so public comment on that is also over. So if folks desire to provide public comment on general matters that are not pending relevant to either of those, we're happy to hear from you. Otherwise, we would move on. Hearings Manager Thomas, if you could elevate yourself and give me a sense of what folks are thinking that may have signed up.
As of right now, Mr. Chair, everyone that signed up did sign up for the general public comment option. That's about all the information I have for you at this moment. We did make note in emails to them that we were not taking public comment on either of those matters, secret stash or the rulemaking. So the commenters should be aware of that fact.
Maybe what let's do, if anyone, there's 84 participants with us. If anyone has signed up for public comment and desires to provide public comment on matters that are pertinent, in other words, not already closed, raise your hand. Director Murphy, I see you visualized yourself. Did you have something to add to this piece, or are you just here for the jolly of the calls?
I'm just here to support.
I kind of like jolly of the calls. Come on. Mr. Kamen and Mr. Ephraim and Miss Kamen, I see you guys have visualized yourself. Mr. Ephraim, you visualized yourself first. Did you desire to provide public comment on matters that public comment remains open? Did you hear my initial comments?
I did. Thank you. I honestly, we've been trying to kind of, especially with that last minute kind of note and stuff, communicate to the larger, STAR volunteers and as well as any public that wishes to hear, kind of trying to inform them and direct them. And I'm not sure if we're even clear on what can and can't be talked about, but my comments are not specific to these matters, as directed, but I'm not exactly sure if basically if I guess if you could give me some leeway and you can decide if they'd be stricken or
Yeah,
not.
yeah. So basically, the point being is that for the secret stash OGGP and for the produced water rules that are before us, we have rule set aside times for public comment, for party participation, and all the foregoing. And we've done a lot of that on both. I think you would agree. So we don't have an opportunity for additional public comment on either of those matters. If you desire to provide public comment on general matters or other things, absolutely, we relish public comment. I'm just trying to follow the rules in terms of what's allowed and what's not allowed by our rules. Is that fair?
Yeah. I think especially with your last statement, it kind of got me worried or confused because you're like, it was tough to direct people on what they might want to bring and if that was appropriate or not based off of, well, if it can't be those, can it be other closed items or other items that were, approved or in general or something? So I think we did try to direct people, not direct them, but try to inform and answer questions as clearly as possible. There might still be some comments that relate to matters that have already been heard or clear or something like that. And I think it ask for a little bit of leeway there and use your best judgment on if it's something you'd like to take into consideration or not.
Okay, that's fine. Before we hear from you, I would recognize for the record that Commissioner Ogletree is with us from CDPHE. Welcome, Michael. Glad to have you with us. We're going to do public comment here for a bit, and then we're going to move to produced water. And I know we relish your input on that front as well. So with that, Mr. Ephraim, you've got 3 minutes, and try to tailor your comments to things that are relevant to us that are not secret stash or produced water.
Understood. Okay. Thank you, Commissioner. And thank you, other commissioners, for the opportunity to speak today. As stated, my name is Jason Ephraim. I live at 6946 South Titus Street in the South Shore development. And I'm here to address kind of a general critical issue regarding the Lowry Ranch cap and indeed any other caps that would kind of match this, specifically in regards to OGD applications that we've seen submitted thus far that are in different stages of approval. And specifically, it's to do with the electrification requirement, the motion that was put upon that cap as a condition of its approval by the commissioners here. And I was looking at Rule 314, Section E, Paragraph 8, which requires that all cap applications must include material demonstrating an operator's plans to electrify its OGDPs. It's very clear from the regulations as I read them that this is not a, guideline or nice to have. This is a very straightforward rule where they need to outline if they will electrify, how they will electrify any future OGDPs, as I understood it. At the time of the cap approval with the electrification motion, there were some notes in there, but they did not, the eventual motion, which required electrification at the drilling and production stages, was not satisfied by the electrification, basically the written down plans for that. And the commissioners went into detail on what stages they were at with Excel, with running out support and infrastructure to run grid power to the proposed OGDPs, such as State Sunlight Long and other ones that we've seen come through. And I think that there was definitely some worry about that from at least my standpoint, that the plain text written cap that was approved didn't amend that to include plans to actually provide that infrastructure and power. It was a mandate and it's something that was understood, but then what's still in the cap order that I've seen includes kind of deficient plans to be able to run that power. And I've kept that concern through till now that we've seen some of these OGDPs come through. And what I was expecting to see was that there would be basically what wasn't in the cap to run electrical power out to these would be in the OGDP stages. And we haven't seen that. And so that's why I wanted to bring this up to consideration, that I think it's a deficiency and probably of the cap that it didn't enforce what was put in as a motion afterwards to provide this power. And my concern raising that is that, if it comes down to the discussion around these OGDPs as they come through, or even if they are approved, when it comes down to being able to actually run power out to these, the operator could potentially come back and say, well, the cap was approved in writing. That doesn't include specifics on having to have writing out to this and power out to this. So I would just like to bring that under review and ask if the ECMC could take a look. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the comments. Duly noted. We will keep that in our back pocket as we move toward the OGDP considerations, and would alert Director Murphy to those, as well as the director does her review of the particular OGDPs under the Lowry cap. Do we have Mr. Kamen, Mark Goldsmith Kamen? Mr. Kamen, I assume you heard my instructions to Mr. Ephraim and would ask that you sort of tender remarks in a similar fashion.
Yes, and I believe my comment is a general comment.
Excellent. Look forward to hearing from you.
Okay. Thank you. Good morning. I am Mark Goldsmith Kamen, And I would like to address significant issues that I see in the way ECMC approvals are currently being handled and managed for new OGDP filings in general. According to ECMC rules, an operator is required to evaluate and analyze potential impacts for all other resources within a 1 mile radius for the working pad surface of oil and gas locations. Another rule requires the operator to consider, quote, reasonably foreseeable future developments, unquote, in the operator's cumulative impact plan. ECMC rules define a reasonably foreseeable future development as the development that has not yet been undertaken for which an applicable local, state, or federal agency has received an application or issued a permit. Future development is reasonably foreseeable only if information related to the permit is publicly available. For example, I've noticed that at least one recent director's recommendation did not use an appropriate level of diligence in following the ECMC rules when evaluating an oil and gas operator's filings. In this case, the director's office did not validate that the local government supporting comments in the operator's filing were current enough to reflect the latest foreseeable developments that had already been filed as a multi-stage development. Nor did they verify that statements made by that local government entity were accurate when they stated that they, quote, appear to meet the regulatory requirements, unquote, of another proximate government entity when they were obviously mistaken. Another issue is that there doesn't appear to be a mechanism in place for coordinating with local entities or proximate governments to assure that comments submitted on behalf of operators reflect the latest developments within the potentially affected areas. These are changes that take place on a regular basis and need routine updates. These are serious procedural oversights that put ECMC commissioners in jeopardy of incorrectly ruling on issues before them. I assume this situation is true for all applications coming before the ECMC, so it's imperative that these significant deficiencies be addressed prior to any further actions on any existing or future cases that will come before the ECMC. Thank you. I appreciate your hearing my comment today.
Thank you very much. We'll now hear from Ms. Kamen.
Ms. Kamen, you're, I think, still muted.
Sorry about that. Thank you for letting me know. My name is Marcia Goldsmith-Kamen, and I would like to focus my comments on all Colorado OGDP applicants providing thorough cumulative impacts analysis that includes not only the proposed OGDP, but also its proximity to reasonably foreseeable future developments. As Mark just mentioned, ECMC rules require the operator to evaluate and analyze potential impacts for all other resources within a 1 mile radius from the working pad surface. ECMC requires the operator to consider reasonably foreseeable future developments in the operator's cumulative impact plan. And as Mark stated, the ECMC rule definition of reasonably foreseeable future development that has not yet been undertaken. Future development is reasonably foreseeable only if information related to the permit is publicly available. So one example of this is Overland Ranch, which is a reasonably foreseeable development because the information related to the permit was publicly available prior to OGDP applications. City of Aurora documentation about Overland Ranch references a master plan for Overland Ranch and was approved in late spring of 23. There are several stages and components of Overland Ranch development available for review on the City of Aurora development website. This city development website reflects a project create date of July 22, for phase one of Overland Ranch project, and it involves 460 single-family dwellings, parks, and private amenities. Phase two of the ranch development reflects a project creation date of July of 24, which includes 570 single-family homes located within Overland Ranch master plan, which, as I previously stated, was approved previously. If any OGDP that submitted a cumulative impact plan, which was filed after this master plan, phase one and two of Overland Ranch, including both phases, is a reasonably foreseeable future development and is required to be considered by any applicant nearby. Here it's known that a new development or construction is in process and will be constructed in the near future. In Southeast Aurora, where we live, for example, there are a lot of new subdivisions in the development process that could be built at the same time as oil drilling and development. The ECMC process needs to include a more accurate way of knowing about these developments to assure that applicants include them in their cumulative impact plan. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Willard.
Good morning. My name is Randy Willard, and I am a resident of Southeast Aurora. As it turns out, I am an avid fan of the oil and gas permitting process here in Colorado, weird as that may seem. Anyway, today I wanted to comment more generally on some observations I have made over the last 2 years, indulging my passion. First, I would like to say that the ability of the public to participate is one of my favorite things about my avocation. I love Senate Bill 19-181 for what it provides all of us. Another thing I love is my attention to detail, which does not seem to plague the industry or their applications. In my review of many applications across different CAPs and counties, there's blatant use of copy and paste of information that is not subsequently updated to be correct to the location. Take your pick of areas here. The pad, its location, the impact on water, how much is used, the impact on air, the percentages of some things that are used in the process, exceptions that have been applied for or not, emissions of a certain type, number of tanks required or not required on site, and whether a pipeline will be used. From the standpoint of an engineer that helped design many large database systems, I can tell you that if my specs had been that imprecise or flat out wrong, it would have impacted my end product and likely my livelihood. I wonder why request information if it's not validated, and what is the impact of this impudence on our lives? The acquiescence to industry statistics and numbers is why we have 2.8 times more methane in our air than the industry assured us we would. I am not even going to wade into the mess that is 300 plus reports in Weld County being wrong over the course of 3 years. Is it any wonder that Weld County air is now 45% of the pollution we suffer along the Front Range? Weld County commissioners have succumbed to the assurances of future revenues while mortgaging the rest of ours. I ask the state to stop this madness. Every part of this industry, from the mess that has produced water to the emissions that poison us every summer, is an affront to who we are, where we are as humans on this planet. You have a responsibility when you evaluate these OGP applications to fully factor in the current and cumulative impacts of these projects. That is all I can ask in our system. So I would ask again that you heed my plea today, this week, and beyond. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Let's see, Ms. Suzanne.
Good morning. My name is Ann Hussein. I'm a registered nurse and I live at 6900 South Yantley Court in Aurora. I am speaking today on cumulative effects and the impacts on our communities with massive amounts of oil and gas projects. Bill SB 181 guaranteed that the Colorado residents that the ECMC must weigh carefully the health risks of multiple oil and gas projects piggybacked one on top of another on residents in populated areas. Our state regulatory agency relies on the operator's self-reporting data. The industry says it's impossible to definitively pinpoint the health impacts of oil and gas activity on any individual's health outcomes, but thousands of peer-reviewed studies link proximity to fracking operations with a host of medical problems. Every time a comprehensive study has been brought to the ECMC attention, it has been brushed aside. We have heard the studies are not applicable. We have heard that this occurred in a different state with completely different types of mineral makeup or shale. We have heard this study doesn't apply because we are using completely different best management practices, not open pits, etc. All the mitigation practices, the LACT, everything that the industry is doing is not going to prevent us from getting sick. Yesterday, there was a press release from the Colorado School of Public Health with this statement. A new study has found that children in Colorado diagnosed with acute lymphocytic leukemia between 2002 and 2019 were significantly more likely to live near an oil and natural gas well site than children without a cancer diagnosis. Those within a mile were at the highest risk, and 3 miles still showed a higher percentage for ALL diagnosis. This study was published yesterday in a journal that is from the American Association of Research for Cancer. This is an extremely respected institution. It does not publish studies lightly. Research criteria is at the highest level for this organization. This is in Colorado. This is recent. The study found that the risk of leukemia diagnosis was influenced by the number of oil and natural gas wells near a child's home, the intensity of the oil and gas activity, and the distance to the nearest well site. These findings indicate that a combination of proximity, well density, and activity levels should be considered when assessing the health risks associated with oil and natural gas development. Now, what can the commissioners say to refute this study? This was taking place here. The researchers emphasized the need for additional studies to explore the mechanisms. So I say the setbacks for oil and gas projects from homes must be dramatically increased from 2,000 feet. With millions of acres of open land, drilling near our homes shows that our state has placed the health of the oil and gas industry over the Colorado families. I look at you commissioners today, and in my heart, I believe you're decent human beings. Your fathers, your mothers, you may be grandmothers and grandfathers. Can you honestly say that if your daughter or your son came to you and asked you, should I buy this home that's 2,000 feet from an oil and gas pad, and your unborn grandchild would live here and go to school here, what would you tell them? So I thank you for listening to me today, and I hope that you can read the study and incorporate this into your setbacks. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Hussein?
Okay.
Am I next?
Yes.
Yes, you are.
Thank you, commissioners. Thank you for listening to me. And my wife went into detail of the public health studies. These are 2017 and 2025 studies, and that find that proximity to oil and natural gas wells increase the risk of childhood leukemia, and concluded that Colorado setback regulations may not adequately safeguard the children's health in oil and gas development area. The study found that the risk of leukemia diagnosis was influenced by the number of the oil wells and near the child's home, the intensity of the oil and natural gas activity, and the distance to nearest well site. These findings indicate that a combination of proximity is very critical. While each individual fracking well presents its own risk, the cumulative effect becomes far more severe when multiple fracking pads are located in close proximity to each other. Air quality index deteriorates due to emissions of volatile organic compounds such as benzene, toluene, and methane. These are not only pollutants, they can cause respiratory disease, neurological damage, and cancer. From an environmental standpoint, clustering fracking wells heightens ecological damage. Methane, which you know is a potent greenhouse gas, leaks from the wellheads as well as pipelines, contributing to climate change. The combined emissions from multiple wells accelerate the warming process and degrades the air quality. Furthermore, fragmentation of wildlife becomes more pronounced as roads, pipelines, and infrastructures spread to support the concentrated drilling sites. The cumulative impact of fracking both on human health and the environment makes a strong case for second look by commissioners of the ECMC, that is you guys, at current setback regulation. The 3,000 feet setback limit by Arapahoe County does not meet the spirit and the intent of the Colorado law as stipulated in 19181. Many states have banned fracking. Colorado should take lead by suspending all new fracking till a minimum setback of at least 1 mile from the residential areas and Aurora Reservoir is established without any loopholes, etc. Scientific evidence suggests that simply assessing the risk of individual wells is insufficient. Policymakers such as you guys must account for the broader compounded dangers posed by the high-density fracking operations. Thank you, Commissioners.
Thank you, Ms. Ingen.
Yes, good morning, Commissioners. I'm here today to express my frustration with the ongoing battle to keep fracking away from our homes. I've just retired from my husband and I's commercial construction business. So in my retirement years, I wanted to create stained glass, I wanted to garden, I wanted to travel. But now, as you are well aware, these plans to build this nasty, polluting, life-threatening, noisy fracking pads 1 mile from my house. So now I work 3 days a week trying at least to get these well pads moved further away from our homes. If you have heard from Ann and Zaki, the nasty new evidence of this is real and we can't fight the science anymore. So and how can I possibly fight a team of well-paid full-time lawyers who are allowed more time with you than the people like us who are not lawyers? I did not know much about fracking laws. I did not go onto government websites to look up different bills. Now I'm learning. I cannot think of any way I would rather not spend my retirement years. Reading the rules and documentation from oil and gas makes my eyes bleed. But this is important to me. And I know that you, commissions, you've got to be frustrated hearing the same old lines from people who are concerned about fracking. Like, it is scientifically proven, like I just said, it harms people, even kills people. It is now known and scientifically proven that the elderly living by fracking die sooner. Thanks a lot. I worked my fingers to the bone my entire life. No one ever gave me anything. I now had to die earlier because O&G wants to line their pockets with more money. We built our home here a mile away with our own hands, my husband and I. We've been married 40 years, and when we were in our 30s, we got this great piece of property, and we built our home with our own hands. No, I do not want to move because of big oil. You have heard us talk about the noise, the amount of water used and poison, the constant bright lights, the fire dangers, the potential for polluting my well, climate change, earthquakes, and how if we just put this money into renewable energy, this would be over, and we wouldn't have problems like this anymore. Yes, you are sick of people hearing from people who are affected. But what we have to say is big. It's huge. It could kill us, for heaven's sakes. Why is there even a question? Moving these wells is beyond me. Are your bosses pushing you to get these pads through, or they'll find someone who will? No sane human with an ounce of reason would look at these pads and allow them to harm so many of us. The state gave you power. Thank goodness for that. Please use it for good. Thank you for listening to me today.
Thank you, Ms. Ingen. That concludes the folks that have signed up for public comment this morning. I would like to call upon AAG Davenport to come to us and sort of speak to the comment that we received. There were some concerns or some issues relevant to the application of cumulative impacts rules, and some of the public comments treaded a bit onto specific applications. Mr. Davenport, AAG Davenport, can you provide any perspective comment on us relative to the public comment we received this morning?
Sure, I'm happy to speak to the question of the applicability of the most recent changes to the rules based on the cumulative impact rulemaking. That rulemaking did have an effective date. It did provide that applications filed, and this is also pursuant to the APA, which provides that applications, unless certain exceptions apply, must be judged upon based on the rules as they exist at the time the application is filed. So unfortunately, I don't have the dates of when all of the applications that were addressed in public comment were filed, but to me, there's a significant possibility that the most recent or the current version of the rules in regard to reasonably foreseeable future development and other issues may not apply to those applications because they were filed prior to the most recent update of the CI rules going into effect.
And AG Davenport, you referenced the APA, that's the Administrative Procedures Act.
Yes, thank you.
That is the statute that guides the work that we do here at the commission. Is that accurate?
That's correct. Thank you for the clarification, Chair.
Okay. Any questions of Mr. Davenport? All right, that would conclude.
Sorry, Chair.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I don't
Oh.
have a question for AAG Davenport, but I did just want to make, one other comment in response to the public comments, if that's okay.
Go ahead, absolutely. Sorry,
I
I
just-
didn't see you.
No, you're good. I just wanted to thank the commenters who flagged the new study from the School of Public Health. That was not something I was aware of, so appreciate that being brought to our attention, and just wanted to say that, and we'll be sure to take a look at that.
Excellent. Others with comments on the comments? All right, seeing none, we will move down our docket. Next is docket 24909000229, the produced water rulemaking. Before us this morning, commissioners, is the statement of basis and purpose. We need to have a discussion to ensure that commissioners are comfortable that the SBP, as we call it, using acronyms in this world, is consistent with the rules that we adopted. And for the rest of those that are listening in, there's 105 of you now. The statement of basis and purpose is sort of the guiding document that provides additional perspective and guidance to inform how the rules will be applied, the produced water rulemaking into the future. So that's one piece that we need. A second piece that we need to discuss and or just alert the world to is that with regard to two issues, one, the produced water, the prohibition of new water facilities in disproportionately impacted communities, that is going to be provided to Commissioner Messner and the Produced Water Consortium for additional work on that. That was an issue that it seemed there was consensus from stakeholders that we needed some additional work around that to determine an appropriate approach to that issue. And then a third issue is the concept of air monitoring. And that issue is going to be delegated to Commissioner Oath to run a stakeholder group around that and report back to the commission with ideas around that issue. And then a final issue, and the one I'm going to start with, is we need to hear from staff on a couple of minor issues, placeholders that need to be dealt with. So let's hear from staff first. Good morning, AG Ward and Mr. Heil. Glad to see both of you. If you want to walk us through the issues that you have for us, we'll start there and then we'll work our way back to the other issues.
Yeah, absolutely. Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Okay, great. So we have a really quick slideshow. So good morning. My name is Tessa Ward. I'm an Assistant Attorney General representing staff in the produced water rulemaking, and John Heil, Environmental Protection Specialist, is sharing his screen. We're just going to provide a really quick update because the produced water rules that were provisionally approved at the February 26th hearing contained a few placeholders, both of which staff acknowledged in its presentation and were evident throughout the draft. So first, the rules included a placeholder previously called Form X for the form that transfers credits to third-party operators. Staff has now identified that form as Form 48 and refers to it as such in the SBP that was posted this week. You can see on this slide each of the rules that included that placeholder, previously Form X, now Form 48. Second, as staff acknowledged in its presentation, the rules previously included a placeholder for a specific basin map. Staff proposes the language on this slide to incorporate by reference into ECMC rules, the Colorado Geologic Survey's map layer for basin outlines. This layer has been available on the ECMC website for some time, but staff proposes to incorporate it by reference into the rules due to its role in the produced water rules and the associated legal requirements. Staff has also updated the ECMC GIS online interactive map layer to incorporate the most recent version, which has expanded basin boundaries based on more recent oil and gas data. And with that, Mr. Heil and I are available to answer any questions about these two placeholder changes, and we will otherwise be available for SBP questions for the rest of today's hearing.
Thank you so much, Ms. Ward and Mr. Heil, for the presentation. Commissioners, the panel is open for questions. Commissioner Ackerman?
Thank you. Just to clarify, and I don't mean to put you on the spot here, AAG Ward, if we need to look into this, my understanding is that wells that fall outside of basins, as depicted in the basin map that you just showed, will still continue to be counted within the most adjacent basin. Is that correct?
Yeah, within the nearest basin. And off the top of my head, I think this is 431E2. We're referring to those types of locations as outlying locations, and they will be aggregated with the closest basin according to this map that is now incorporated.
Thank you.
Other questions for the panel? All right, I don't think I'm seeing further questions. If y'all want to stick around, that would be great. Okay, so next is opening the discussion amongst the commissioners in terms of, we've all read the statement of basis and purpose, the SPB, and do commissioners have any questions, thoughts, concerns relevant to what's before us, whether it's consistent with the rules that we provisionally adopted or otherwise on this topic? Commissioner Messner?
Thanks, and appreciate the work on the statement of basis and purpose. Obviously, an important companion to the rules that have been developed, and I think staff did a good job of capturing our deliberations and the process that we went through in developing the rules. I do have some suggestions on some changes, and some of them are not very big deal, and then some of them are a little bigger. And so I guess a question, I can go through page by page and kind of share some of my changes, or I can talk about concepts initially here. I'm not sure what is the preferred, I guess, path forward, but any thoughts on that before I start? Otherwise, I'll just go page by page.
I guess it depends upon how deep you're diving, Commissioner Messner.
There's just a
maybe
few sections, so I mean,
Yeah.
it's not significant, but I do think it's important.
So we should probably get someone to share screen, because of the 105 people that are listening in, they may not have access or have it up on their screen. Could I get an AAG to share a screen and page by page it with us, or do you have it, Commissioner Messner?
I have it, but
AAG Stafford may be coming to your grace here.
yeah.
Sure, I'm happy to share the most recent draft if that works for everyone, and we can kind of pinpoint where you're making suggestions, and then perhaps staff can make edits to show where those inclusions will go.
Does that work, John?
That works for me. And if I need to share a screen on my notes at any time, I can certainly make that effort as well. So
AG Stafford, let's start with you sharing screen, and then we'll have Commissioner Messner walk through his thoughts.
So my first change is just on page 1, and well, holistically throughout the document indicates HB 1242. I think probably it needs to say HB 23-1242 because there'll be different 1242s depending on the year of the House bills. And so I think it might be important, unless I'm not thinking of something, to specify that it's HB 23-1242, and that's consistent through the entire document. And so that's just one of the little things.
Yeah, and Commissioner Messner, I think what I'll do is, after you make a suggestion, unless a commissioner sort of has concerns, we'll just adopt it, because like that one is a no-brainer to me.
Good.
Except for it's not a no-brainer to Ackerman and/or Cross. So let's go with Ackerman first.
Thanks. The way I read it is that they're using the short form of HB 1242 after noting in the first paragraph under background that House Bill 23-1242, and then in parentheses, quote, HB 1242. It's generally the conventional way to shorten and not have to write it throughout the document. And so it's acceptable to me, but I don't have a huge aversion to being more explicit if we need to be.
Leave it to the wildlife biologist to be the better attorney amongst all of us.
Yeah, and I missed that. And so if that's the case, then that's no problem. Like I said, just a little thing there. So whatever you want to do there, it doesn't matter to me. There is a paragraph in there that talks about the creation of the Colorado Produced Water Consortium. And initially it said the consortium is made up of a diverse group of 31 government representatives, oil and gas industry representatives, and then members of NGOs. I think to be accurate, that needs to be a little more explicit as to what actually the diverse group of 31 members of the consortium are. And so my recommendation would be to just utilize what's been consistently been utilized in the consortium's publications, which is the consortium is made up of a diverse group of 31 representatives, including federal, state, and local government, representatives of research institutions and institutions of higher education, oil and gas industry representatives, produced water experts, and then members of non-governmental organizations that advocate for policies for environmental justice, conservation, and disproportionately impacted communities. That does capture the different levels of stakeholder representation that's in the Colorado Produced Water Consortium. And so I do think that that's important so that someone reading this without knowing other parts about the consortium do understand the stakeholders that have been involved in that group.
Any concerns with that suggestion? Adopted.
Okay.
If I might jump in briefly here, just to let you all know, staff will be capturing the specific edits on their end, and they'll come back with a red line shortly after we go through the SBP. I'm just making sure we can get through everyone's comments here and capturing those.
Yeah, brilliant move. Thanks, AG Stafford.
So to page 7 under Rule 905. And I have some suggestions for wording for the air quality stakeholder group, but I don't want to share those until after we hear from Commissioner Oath, because I think she will have better suggestions than I have. And so my suggestion, though, and this was part of my testimony as part of development of the rules, is to include a paragraph after the first paragraph under Rule 905A4 that talks about and task the consortium with further analysis and work on overcoming barriers and providing recommendations to the commission on reuse and recycling, the barriers that have been identified to reuse and recycling at higher levels by the consortium's studies, reports, and analysis. And while we certainly had extensive discussions about looking at the barrier associated with increased levels of reuse and recycling on the western slope that could be challenged by the blanket prohibition of centralized produced water treatment facilities in disproportionately impacted communities, and have tasked the consortium with looking at that and trying to work through that potential barrier. There are other barriers that have been identified that I think we should also capture in the statement of basis and purpose and ask the consortium to continue work on. And those would include storage and transportation, legal and liability issues, fit for use classifications, data improvement, testing standards, community and environmental justice concerns, research gaps, and water share agreements. I don't know if there's a time specific or a specific ask for when those recommendations should come in, but I do think it's important, and we heard from a number of stakeholders on this topic, that the consortium continue to work on these and provide recommendations to ECMC. In addition, there was specific requests by a number of stakeholders, in particular Ms. Cummings, on asking the consortium to continue to collect and refine and analyze basin-specific data to inform conversations around basin-specific considerations and targets that would result in recommendations to ECMC for a future rulemaking on the topic. Again, not a rulemaking in a time-specific fashion, but in a acknowledgement that that is a part of the work that the consortium is already intending on doing, but I think it helps the consortium in their path as they look at what they need to be working on to have some direction from ECMC or an ask of the consortium from ECMC. And so I have a paragraph that I'd like to place in there that captures that the commission would request that the consortium continue to work through those barriers and develop pragmatic recommendations for solution as the works continue on those topics that I identified. Happy to share that paragraph or read that paragraph here initially, but that's the gist of it.
Commissioner Messner, would you prefer if I put the paragraph up on the screen for everyone's consideration?
That would be preferable.
Okay.
And I've modified that paragraph just a little bit this morning since I sent it, but that's the general piece.
Okay, so I've read the paragraph. The one, I guess my first question for the attorney generals in the room, we spent a long time stakeholdering produced water rulemaking rules. We came up with rules. I don't think I've got a tremendous concern with this, but I also don't want this to undercut the integrity of rules that have been adopted. And so, AGs, could you opine as to whether this has the characteristic of potentially having that kind of concern or not? And I don't have an answer to the question that I'm throwing out there.
Chair, I can start, and then if AAG Ward wants to pipe in with staff, any staff concerns, as you're aware, the statement of basis and purpose is intended to sort of, fill in the understanding of the rules. It is supposed to sort of set forth an explanation as to why specific rules were adopted by the commission here. And I think there is some flexibility in the language that you include in the statement of basis and purpose. And so as I read the paragraph that Commissioner Messner has offered here, I don't see that there is any change in the sort of intent of the rules. That seems to remain the same the way that I'm reading them. It's this paragraph by my reading offers some clearer understanding as to, you know, sort of what the commission intends and sort of what they hope the consortium might do in continuing its efforts. I would look to AAG Ward to see if she has any concerns on staff's behalf, though.
Yeah, I agree with AAG Stafford's opinion. No legal or policy concerns from staff's point of view.
Great. Appreciate that answer to the wonder from me. Commissioner Oath, you'd raised your hand and now it's dropped. Do you have questions?
I do just have one. I think this looks good to me. Just trying to be cognizant of being clear about the demarcations between the two groups that will be meeting. So, Commissioner Messner, in the last sentence, when you talk about basin-specific data, I don't believe that's referring to air data, but I just wanted to make sure we're on the same page there.
Yeah, that's correct. I mean, that's analyzing the Form 7, 7W, 47, the new reporting requirements that are developed as part of this rulemaking, and compiling, analyzing, and designing that data to look at basin-specific numbers to help inform, you know, any considerations for basin-specific targets in the future. I think we've identified through a lot of testimony in this rulemaking that there's a desire to look at basin-specific pieces, but that historically there's been a lack of consistent and accurate data-specific data. And so I think as these new reporting requirements get as they get rolled out and are continuing to get rolled out and more data comes in, it enables that data to be compiled and evaluated on a basin-specific level to help inform future decision making.
But that makes total sense to me, and I think the way you wrote it also reflects that, right? That it's data, that's the purpose of that data. So I think it's clear that it's not talking about air data, but just wanted to make sure.
Yeah.
All right. With that, Commissioner Ackerman.
Sorry, Mr. Chair, and thank you for allowing me to chime in here. I just wanted to raise this issue. I think it's probably implicit with the term data improvement, but you know, we had several, or at least some commenters raise issues about verification as well as public transparency of data. Would it be appropriate to include that in this sentence here, data improvement, including public transparency and verification? Or are we comfortable leaving it just as data improvement, as it's kind of an all-encompassing term? I'm particularly interested in Commissioner Messner's thoughts on that.
Thanks, Commissioner Ackerman. I mean, you captured my intent with the utilization of the term improvement. If you'd like to see more explicit direction, I'm fine with that too, but that was my intent.
Thank you. If that was the intent, I think it would be appropriate to include it if others are okay with including a brief clarifier of including public transparency and data verification.
It's fine by me.
All right. So we're good with this proposed edit. AAG Stafford, if you could make note of it, and then once you're done typing, we'll move back to the main SBP and allow Commissioner Messner to opine on his next proposed edit.
Thank you, Chair. And just briefly, Commissioner Ackerman, it was including public transparency and data verification. Okay.
AAG Stafford, just let me know when you're ready.
All good. Thank you.
Okay, on page 8, under 905C6A, second paragraph that starts, the consortium recommended a statewide approach. In the second sentence there, it states the consortium is based on recommendation on the reliance on data. That reads a little funny, and I'm not meaning to wordsmith here, but the consortium based its recommendation on data reported. And so I think the 3 words on the reliance should just be stricken there.
Seeing no concerns, that's adopted.
As we move through that same section under Rule 905C6A onto page 9, there's a paragraph that starts with the commission required operators to comply with targets. And in that paragraph, it talks about, based on comments from operators and industry trade groups during the rulemaking, the commission acknowledged that OGDP by OGDP or cap by cap compliance with the water use requirements, could be technologically infeasible, especially in geologic basins where wells do not produce significant quantities of produced water. And then it goes on to say the commission also acknowledged the increased administrative burden on ECMC staff and tracking compliance on an OGDP or cap basis. And I think those are 2 reasons identified that an OGDP by OGDP or cap by cap compliance was challenging. I think there was a third reason that I think is important to capture in the statement of basis and purpose, and it was brought up by many stakeholders in the process, is that it was also indicated by stakeholders that an OGDP by OGDP or cap by cap specific requirement could create additional unintended impacts to community or the environment that could be alleviated by this broader approach. And so I wanted to suggest that get captured in the statement of basis and purpose, as well as it wasn't just the 2 reasons weren't only because industry was concerned about technological feasibility and ECMC staff were worried about implementation, but rather there was the potential that environmental or community impacts could be more significant if we utilize the OGDP by OGDP approach versus, kind of a broader approach that's being proposed now in the rules.
When you say more significant, Commissioner Messner, do you mean more significantly addressed?
Well, it's addressed in the rules the way that we've drafted them. The reason that there was concern about an OGDP by OGDP approach was that it could potentially have more impact than having this broader approach, because you're requiring, for example, a 10% reuse and recycling in an area that may not be appropriate for that 10% in an OGDP by OGDP approach versus the approach that's being contemplated in the draft rules, which is a broader approach that would allow potentially, 3% to be reused and recycled at this location where there's more receptors, associated, or produced water resources are further away, and then 15% over here in another location where there may not be as many sensitive receptors and produced water may be more available. And the new draft rules do allow for that flexibility. And one of the benefits of that flexibility is the potential to avoid impacts to sensitive receptors.
AAG Stafford, AAG Ward, do you have any comments on this? Are you comfortable in capturing the notion from Commissioner Messner?
No opposition from staff. It's a good edit.
All right, adopted, moving on.
Oh, and then this just last little one. So on the last page, just above Rule 907 section, and it's more of a question. And so in the last sentence of that previous paragraph, it states that the commission adopted the consortium's recommendation for water usage requirements and dates, adopted the consortium's recommendations to allow operators to use, and then in quotes, it states equivalents to recycled produced water, and adopted a credit system to encourage operators to exceed the water use requirements as considered by the consortium. Understanding that the new draft rules has replaced the term equivalents with alternatives. I wasn't sure if that would be confusing and whether we should replace equivalents with the new term alternatives, or whether there was a reason that equivalence was utilized there. And so it's a small thing, but I don't want to confuse folks because there was a
AG Ward?
conscious change to alternatives.
Yeah, we use those quotations for the exact reason you identified. The consortium used the term equivalent and staff changed it to alternative. So no opposition to adding some clarification that it was equivalent in the recommendation and alternatives functions the same way.
Okay. Mr. Chair, those are the changes that I have.
All right, seeing no objection to the last suggestion, that's adopted as well. Other commissioners with specific concerns addressed on the SBP, Commissioner Oath.
Thank you. And I would also like to just give my appreciation to staff. I think that overall the statement of basis and purpose is very reflective of our conversations and very important. So appreciate all your work on that. I do have some thoughts on the section about the convening of the stakeholder group on air emissions data that Commissioner Messner flagged. So it's back up on in 905. I think it's on page 9. And AAG Stafford, while you were busy doing this on this screen, I shared with you, I put into a Google document what I'm thinking and for changes to that paragraph. If you are able to pull it up and share it, that might be the most efficient for people to see it. And if you need some time, I apologize for just getting that to you.
That is no problem. If you can give me a minute to find it, I will come right back. Okay, I have located it. So is your preference that I just share the red line on the screen here?
Yeah, I think that probably, I'm hoping that's more efficient. So sorry to spring this on you.
No problem.
Great.
Commissioner Oath, do you want to provide some perspective on this, or do you want us to read it, or what's your pleasure?
I'm happy to provide some perspective and pause for some chances for folks to digest at the same time. That might be helpful. So in general, I think I've just been thinking about this group, and as I reflected on this language, kind of there's two things, both like how important it is to be thoughtful and pretty specific about the scope of the group, because the consortium does exist and is going to continue its work on many issues related to produced water. And so kind of carving off this issue, I think we want to be really thoughtful and really clear about, what this group is tasked with, so that, where there's overlap, we're clear as much as we can be. And of course, we'll continue to coordinate with one another, but we want to be, I think, as clear upfront as we can about what this group is going to be taking on. And then a second part has to do with sort of in my head how I envision the sort of structure of the group, and how it fits with what we intend going forward. So in this the first sentence that I've changed, or I'm proposing to change, a couple of things are there. So I did suggest striking, including the Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment, and that is by no means to say that I don't think they should be involved. I am super appreciative of our partnership with CDPHE, and we have a very strong partnership with CDPHE, but I'm also just very sensitive that we don't want to sort of try to direct or task that agency with what their participation looks like in a process of ours, but certainly know that they're very aware of this, that this is going to be happening. Commissioner Ogletree is here and I know is aware of it. And, as we move forward and get a better sense of what the scope of the group is and what needs we have from CDPHE, we'll continue to have conversations about, what they are able to contribute in terms of the group's ongoing conversations. So that's that part. And then I think it's really important. The way I see the work of this group is very specifically to discussing the methods to measure, track, and report the data. And so just very kind of, I guess, techie driven and air emissions data specific. I think as the original language to me read quite broad, particularly the parts about any other air quality issues arising from implementation of 1242 could get into all kinds of things, some that may be appropriate to be addressed by the consortium, some that may be appropriate to be addressed by CDPHE. And so I think we just want to be very, very cognizant to be, right on track about what this group is going to be talking about. And then in the next sentence, I think in my mind, I am envisioning that, we'll convene a group of very knowledgeable stakeholders, representative of the different perspectives, pull them together to work through kind of the issues and the questions around how we do measure, track, and report data for this purpose. And that, I will be convening that group, but with support as well from, ECMC subject matter staff who, at the end of the day, at the end of that conversation would be, sort of the one putting together a draft rule for our consideration based on those discussions. I see it more like that, whereas, saying that the group will recommend rules reads to me more like there's, rule drafting and voting happening in the group. And I think that this type of work is better served by a group that can kind of just talk informally and work through the issues and the questions rather than trying to draft rule structure. So does that's hope explains all of the pieces here.
No, thank you very much, Commissioner Oath, for the work here. I knew you were the right person for this job, and you've done a great job of lining it up in my mind for success. I don't have any questions with regard to the proposed edits and changes. Do other commissioners have questions, thoughts, concerns? All right, let's consider that.
I think it's hard to see, but I thought I saw Commissioner Ogletree. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, Commissioner Ogletree, sorry. You're kind of floating in the air over there at CDPHE.
No worries. My camera's all wonky. I was half sideways for a bit. No, I was just gonna, I think, I'm supportive of the changes that Commissioner Oath has and some of that language, and as appropriate and as identified as a stakeholder, happy to have their division participate to ensure that we have, good, strong outcomes.
Excellent. Thank you for the comments, Commissioner Ogle. Others? All right, seeing none, let's consider that proposed edit adopted. Do we have other thoughts about the SBP from commissioners? All right, seeing no further thoughts or raising of hands or otherwise, I believe we've now gotten through our consideration of the SBP. I want to thank staff for the excellent work. Thank commissioners for the excellent final edits here. I believe we've got a good document before us for deliberation and or emotion. Commissioner Cross?
Chair.
Commissioner Cross, we can't hear you.
Is that any better?
It's a ton better.
My monitor went out and it seemed that it reset my microphone when I did so. I will make a motion, but before I do so, I just want to make a couple comments. I did have additional conversations with some stakeholders since our last hearing, and I thought it was appropriate to at least address some of the conversation points that I had with those stakeholders. I do think it's worth noting that some stakeholders expressed concerns regarding many of the issues that were raised when we had our last hearing about the rules themselves specifically, including issues with the idea of what had been titled the consensus draft, and others considered it maybe a collaboration draft. I do want to quickly say, for one thing, it is important to note that this was a draft that was done through a collaboration of numerous stakeholders from many different sides, industry, conservation, local government groups alike. So I had no issue with it as well. I also think it's important to note that while some parties were concerned with the fact that they were not specifically included in those discussions, and expressed some concerns about the process because of this kind of side group that was collaborating. This was not a commission process. It is not as though the commission asked for the parties to form a specific group to agree upon. This was taken upon themselves by those parties that worked together and negotiated it. And I, for one, am appreciative of the work that was done by those parties to collaborate and coming up with solutions that were, again, across different groups, whether it be industry, whether it be environmental groups, whether it be local governments, to come up with solutions that could be agreed upon by a wide swath of parties. And so I am appreciative of that. I do think it's also important to recognize there was additional concerns about the disproportionately impacted community protections, some concerns that protections were being reduced. And I do think it's important to recognize that no protections for disproportionately impacted communities were reduced in what we were putting forward in our rules as suggested. The prohibition as required by the legislation is still in there. While we do have Commissioner Messner taking to the Produced Water Consortium recommendations for how we can better address the siting of centralized E&P waste management facilities. That is purely at this point in time a recommendation, things that can be potentially put forth to the Colorado legislature. But at this point in time, the prohibition as required in HB 23-1242 will continue to be in our rules. And so I do think that that's important to note as well. And finally, I know another issue that was talked about quite a bit was some concerns over data. And this is obviously something that has greater implications than what is just being talked about in this rulemaking. It's obviously been coming up with some of the data falsification issues. And so I'm not going to go into great amount of detail about the different concerns over data. But I do think it's important to note that the commission is aware of these concerns. The commission does think it is vital to make sure that we have good data coming from operators, coming from third-party contractors, data that can be qualified and verified and checked upon. And so I personally have no issues with the rules as stated, with the statement of basis and purpose as stated, in terms of how this collection of data, the collection of information that's going to be used in our rules is set forth in our rules. But I do think it's appropriate to recognize that stakeholders are concerned about some of the data issues that have come before this commission recently. And we as a commission and staff, I know, is cognizant of those concerns and is taking every possible step to make sure that these data concerns are addressed. And we are relying on the best possible data. We are making sure that data can be verified. And we're making sure that we comply with our legislative mandates in doing so. So I just wanted to make sure that I address some of those conversations that I've had recently. And with that, I will move for approval of the rules as we preliminary voted upon at our previous hearing, and for approval of the statement of basis and purpose as we amended in today's hearing.
Hey, AG Stafford, is that motion okay from your end?
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought I clicked video too. My apologies there. So I think the motion here should likely include, let me just get back to my note here. The motion here would be to adopt the February 21st, 2025 consensus draft produced water rules, which were filed into the docket on February 24th, with the modifications that staff discussed today with respect to updating the placeholders in the rules to reference the Form 48 and to specify the geologic basin map recommended by staff today. Further, to adopt the statement of basis and purpose as filed into the docket yesterday, March 11th, as modified by the commission today, and to authorize staff to make any conforming changes and to fix any typographical errors in the adopted rules and statement of basis and purpose prior to filing it with the Secretary of State. So I would encourage someone to make that motion to ensure everything is captured.
Commissioner Cross, friendly amendment to the motion?
I like that wording much better. I will adopt that amendment.
All right, we have that motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Motion and a second. We now move to deliberation on the motion. Commissioner Ackerman?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. No deliberation on the motion itself. I appreciate the work that's been done there. I just had a couple of comments to conclude my thoughts in the hearing as well. I'm very appreciative also of all the work done by many parties on this issue, and I particularly want to thank the members of the Produced Water Consortium. I know we identified that at the beginning of these hearings. I think it's appropriate to recognize once again their work. They've contributed significant time and resources to this issue, and I very much appreciate the work that they've done. I also want to again recognize and thank Commissioner Messner for his leadership and extensive participation on this issue, including working with the consortium. And Commissioner Messner, I really appreciate your customary, well-detailed approach to this and all other issues. I appreciate House Bill 1242, but I do acknowledge that it gave us a number of prescriptive requirements that really did necessitate some creative thinking in order to implement the entire intent of the bill. One example is, on one hand, no new air emissions, but then potentially significantly increasing water hauling if implemented on an OGDP by OGDP basis. So I'm grateful for the work done also by the consensus parties that helped address these and other potentially conflicting mandates in that statute. I, like Commissioner Cross, acknowledge that not all parties were included or offered invitations to participate in what ultimately resulted in the consensus draft. Nonetheless, having participated for many years in the formation of regulations, I also acknowledge that true consensus on any issue, let alone one as divisive and important as water use, is very difficult, and appreciate the work done by all parties. I do appreciate that stakeholder consensus approach. I recognize the significant additional stakeholder work associated with that approach, and certainly continue to encourage any stakeholders that engage in this type of approach in the future to do their best to invite and include all interested parties in any future such endeavor. As was discussed, I acknowledge that some parties raised concern about accuracy of data reporting, especially as it relates to the credit program, as well as concerns about the credit program in general. I appreciate the conversations that we had about these issues, and I believe I agree with Commissioner Cross's comments on the issue, and I think that some of the edits Commissioner Messner suggested today really help further address those issues by asking the consortium to continue its work as an advisory group. I want to be clear that I do support the credit system. I feel it or some other analog was absolutely necessary in order to create a pathway that would achieve all of the goals of the legislation as intended. And just wanted to reiterate that, the comments of many and my thoughts as well, that water really is one of the most important resources that we work with. And therefore, to me, it's one of the most important and impactful considerations in oil and gas development. I'm hopeful that these regulations and the plan and the pathway laid out therein will continue to incrementally increase the use of produced water and reduce the use of fresh water in oil and gas development. And I'm counting on the industry's significant expertise and resources in ensuring we're doing absolutely everything possible to go above and beyond and protect fresh water and minimize its permanent disposal in Colorado. That said, Mr. Chair, I'm in favor of the motion as it's presented.
Thank you very much. A few deliberative comments from myself. One, following the provisional adoption of the rules, I do want everyone to know that I did have some, I thought, good discussions with parties from all sides relative to the prohibition of new water treatment facilities, and DIC wanted to try to see if an early resolution on that could be done. That didn't happen, but I appreciated the discussions and am excited to hand that over to Commissioner Messner for work with the Produced Water Consortium. I believe there's a lot of synthesis from parties around this issue to achieve a pragmatic solution to the issue. So just wanted to make that point. A second point, which is really particular, but on page 5 of the SBP, the language in speaking to recycled produced water alternatives, the language specifically says the commission has provided an exhaustive list of recycled produced water alternatives, which will count toward the recycled produced water requirements and may be used for credits, etc. I just wanted to make a record that, at least from this commissioner's perspective, that quote exhaustive list is current. That's what's happening right now. It's what we're thinking about right now. But I do not see that as precluding in a future rulemaking this commission from having an opportunity to expand, look at other alternatives, et cetera, with regard to recycled produced water requirements. We've got that ability, and I anticipate that the commission will do what is right at that time in the future. So the word exhaustive is not preclusive of additional thoughts down the road from commissions. So those are my thoughts on that. Otherwise, I echo all the comments from Commissioner Cross and Commissioner Ackerman to all the parties for the great work done, to the Produced Water Consortium, and I look forward to the Produced Water Consortium's work on the DIC issue, as well as the stakeholder group run by Commissioner Oath on the air monitoring issue. Others with deliberative thoughts? Commissioner Messner?
Thanks for all the comments. Always appreciate the thoughts of my fellow commissioners, and I'm just going to reiterate some thoughts that I provided at the last hearing. And so really my final thoughts on this before we vote are of appreciation to all that have been involved. I do think that all of you in the state of Colorado are once again showing what it means to lead finding ways to come to pragmatic solutions to challenging topics. At times that means compromise, at times that means consensus, and at times that means frustration. But I'm continually amazed that we find ways to work together, to move forward, and to lead in accomplishing really big goals. And I think these rules and the efforts behind them are just another great example of this. So I want to thank everyone that's been involved in this and appreciate the rules that have been developed.
Thank you for the comments. Any further comments? Seeing no further comments, all those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. The rules are adopted. The SBP as edited will be adopted as well. It's 10:26. Let's take a break before our next and final item. Let's return at 10:36. We'll be back here in just a bit for the next item on our agenda. Welcome back. This is the Energy and Carbon Management Commission for the state of Colorado. This is our Wednesday, March 12th docket. And we now turn to docket 241100271, a variance request. The applicant is Williford Resources, LLC. We now will hear from Mr. Willis and/or from any of the witnesses he may have.
Thank you, Chairman Robbins, and commissioners. My name is Rob Willis of the Steptoe Johnson Law Firm, and today I'm appearing on behalf of my client, Williford Resources, LLC. The managing member of that business, Hearn Williford, is seated next to me here in downtown Denver today. This is on an application brought pursuant to Rule 702 for a variance from Rule 903, the prohibition of venting and flaring of natural gas at normal operating conditions. I thought it'd be beneficial to start with a quick refresher. Williford Resources operates 51 oil and gas wells in the Red Mesa field located in La Plata County. Of those 51 total wells, 37 oil wells are designated Category A and B wells for purposes of this request, and more on that later, while 9 wells are classified as Category C wells. These Category C wells are presently shut in and should remain shut in under an approved variance. All of these wells are low-producing, low gas-to-oil ratio wells. The focus of this variance request is the 37 Category A and B wells. Unused casing head gas produced and associated with oil production from the wells is collected through Williford's gas gathering system, which transfers the unused gas for destruction at either the west or east combustor facilities. Metering of gas at the combustors puts field-wide unused gas production at no more than 47 MCF per day, a small volume of gas characterized as de minimis. Upstream of the combustors, certain produced gas is used. It's used to power lease equipment, with some of the lease equipment powered by electricity to minimize noise disturbances to nearby residences. Also, it's used to heat field offices and supply gas to several domestic users. Historically, produced gas from the Williford operations was sold through the Red Mesa gas gathering system. This system was abandoned in February 2016, effectively stranding any produced gas from market. In reaction to the abandonment of the Red Mesa gas gathering system, Williford and then COGCC entered into a compliance agreement, which was effective on January 1st, 2017, whereupon Williford was authorized to vent or combust unused casing head gas until January 15, 2021. Acting under terms of the compliance agreement, Williford established a gas gathering system for collection of gas for Category A and B wells and incorporated redundant EPA-permitted combustors at the east and west combustor facilities. Category C wells, which also produce de minimis volumes of casing head gas and are presently shut in, are situated in remote locations and will remain shut in for the foreseeable future, subject to Williford's continuing assessment on bringing one or more of these wells into its gas gathering system. On April 20th, 2022, the commission considered Williford's first variance application from Rule 903 and issued order number 1265, finding that Williford satisfied Rule 502C variance requirements and authorized Williford to combust unused casing head gas for the category A and B wells until such time that the commission considered the Williford's second variance application from Rule 903. Upon hearing that application, the commission issued order number 1339, granting the variance request, authorizing Williford to continue combusting unused casing head gas from the category A and B wells on finding that the requirements for a temporary Rule 502 variance were still applicable and incorporated order number 1265 findings and conclusions into order number 1339. Hearn Williford, the managing member of Williford Resources, is here today to provide testimony and answer any questions you might have in support of the pending Rule 502 variance application from Rule 903. Mr. Williford graduated from Texas A&M University in 1978 with a degree in petroleum engineering. He has extensive work history in the oil and gas industry for at least the past 45 years. At the conclusion of Mr. Williford's testimony, the record will show that, one, Williford has and continues to make good faith efforts to comply with Rule 903D. Despite those efforts, there is no identified alternate beneficial use for the unused gas produced from the category A and B wells. However, Williford has entered into negotiations with La Plata Electric Association, LPEA, to explore utilizing the de minimis amount of category A and B unused casing head gas to generate single-phase power and place this power into the LPEA grid, with hopes that this will occur mid-year 2026. In addition, Williford would like to point out that it takes its regulatory obligations seriously and looks forward to continuing to operate in compliance with ECMC rules and regulations. This was most recently demonstrated by Williford by shutting in its operations on January 31st, when authority to combust category A and B wells produce gas tolled by order number 1339 through today's hearing. The requested variance, number two, the requested variance aligns with the basic intent of the amended Oil and Gas Act. The act contemplates that some amount of flaring or venting may be necessary under certain circumstances, which the commission acknowledged in promulgating Rule 903. The commission has recognized that a variance, though disfavored, is permitted. The commission has found on two separate occasions that Williford's prior requests for Rule 502 variance from Rule 903 align with the basic intent of the act, which includes regulating oil and gas production in Colorado while protecting public health and the environment. Number three, granting the variance is necessary to avoid undue hardship to various parties, including Williford Resources, other working interest owners, royalty owners, domestic users, and others by supplementing oil supplies. Number four, the variance will not result in a net adverse impact to public health, safety, welfare, the environment, or wildlife resources. Williford Resources operations are located within external boundaries of the Southern Ute Indian tribe, and the de minimis amount of unused gas is continually destroyed by EPA permitted combustors at 98+% destructive efficiency. The director's recommendation found in this file also addresses no net adverse impact. Number five, the requested variance is temporary and subject to conditions of approval to reasonably minimize adverse impacts. Williford Resources will continue to diligently investigate and evaluate alternate beneficial uses for its unused gas and update the commission as required. In conclusion, Williford Resources today requests the commission approve the variance authorizing combustion of unused casing head gas from the category A and B wells for a period of time under terms and conditions found in the director's recommendation. Chairman, that concludes my remarks. I've got Hearn Williford next to me. He has not been sworn yet.
AAG Davenport.
Thank you, Mr. Willis. Sir, if you could please raise your hand, state your name, and say that you swear to tell the truth.
My name is Alan Hearn Williford, and I swear to tell the truth.
Thank you.
Mr. Willis, the witness is yours.
Thank you, Chairman Robbins. I believe Mr. Williford has a narrative that he'd like to make right now, and then obviously at the conclusion of his narrative, he'll subject himself to any questions that the commissioners might have.
That's fine.
Good day, commissioners. I would like to say I appreciate this opportunity to speak before y'all. What I would like to discuss is during the previous hearings, y'all said I need to find a beneficial use for the gas. And we've been working on that. As I testified to last hearing, we had preliminary ideas that the local electric co-op, La Plata Electric, Association, was going to have a change in their primary supplying contract agreement, and that was with Tri-States Generation and Transmission. And effective April 1st of 2024, they opted out of their contract with Tri-States, and there's a 2-year period before they could enter into any other PPAs or power purchase agreements. And so I've been in discussions with La Plata Electric since that time, trying to explain to what our situation is there. I dealt with La Plata Electric back in 2016 and 2017 when we lost our ability to sell gas on the Red Mesa system. And so I started conversations. We've had numerous emails, 30 or so. And in December, I received a email, which I would like to read to you, that said, "Thank you for your phone call the other day and more thorough explanation of your project and challenges you are facing. I've socialized this project with some of our board of directors and their support for allowing an interconnection and a PPA for this project. We're working on a generic interconnection application for some other larger prospects, and I think that may be applicable to your project as well. We should be ready to work on these agreements with you in Q2 of this year, and in the meantime, I would suggest that you start the line upgrade job with our engineering clerk. I've had phone calls with the engineering clerk. We're not quite ready to start an application yet, but I believe this is going to be this will be the only method we have of utilizing our gas that we're currently combusting. And it won't be available till April 1st, 2026. I would say more likely mid-year 2026 when we can get this operation going. So that is why we're here asking for a variance today. And I'll answer any questions y'all have.
Very good. Commissioners, the panel is open for questions. Commissioner Cross.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And thank you, Mr. Williford. I appreciate you speaking with us. I want to make sure that I understand what exactly through LPEA you are trying to get done here? Because one of your updates, I know we heard that they said, yes, we'd like to set up a proposal. And you talked about the price and said that price was going to be hard to manage, and therefore you'd like to propose an alternative. Is what you're talking about the alternative that you're trying to propose, or is it going back to what they initially seemed to say yes to?
Thank you for bringing that up. It is the alternative I've proposed. They were asking for me in the initial talks. They were asking me to support building a three-phase system that they don't have out there right now, and come to the area, the point where we'll have a generator and a meter for their part. What we're going to do now is we're going to upgrade. I'm going to have to pay to upgrade some of their systems right there in that immediate area, but we're only going to generate single-phase power, not three-phase power. And we're going to put that three-phase power on the same system that I utilize, that all my neighbors, I call the town and everything, all the neighbors utilize. The single-phase system, we're going to place electricity on that system. And they have accepted that.
So the alternative, the single phase that you're talking about, they are okay with, but it's not going to be, you're going to be able to submit the application next year, or you're hoping to submit the application soon and have it ready to go next year?
Excuse me. We're talking about entering into a PPA this year. We're not allowed to place any electricity on their system until after April 1st, 2026. So there's still other things we need to do. We need to get into their engineering group and get the construction. We haven't decided on exactly where we're going to have their meter come in, or 2 meters in this case, because we're going with smaller generators and having 2 smaller generators going to 2 individual systems that can be split at one point. They have a system going south and a system going east. And we're going to put one generator on one system and the other generator on the other system. And they've agreed to this. But we haven't even made that application yet, or the application for the purchase power agreement. They haven't even written it yet. So those are steps coming. And like I said, it was end of quarter 2, beginning of quarter 3 is what our latest talks are, but when they'll have a generic power purchase agreement available for me to even start looking at, and probably have a little negotiation on a generic agreement, but I believe it'll be acceptable. And we're going at a purchase price of around $0.05 for kWh, which is pretty low. The open market's 11.5, 12 cents. But in this case, I don't have a choice. I will go with whatever's available.
And so ultimately what you're going to try and, or what you are asking for now, is the ability to flare and to bring your wells back into production here until such time as you can hook up to their meter.
Yes, sir. That is correct, because we do need the purchase power involved in buying equipment, upgrading systems, and things of this nature. So we would like to continue to produce oil. We're still making the same amount of gas. Last 2 years, 2023 and 2024, we're combusting 46.2 MCF a day and 46.3 MCF a day, respectively. So almost identical amounts every day, metered volumes at the combustors. So we have no gas increases. It's the same amount of gas we've been producing.
And if the variance were to be granted and you were to bring the wells back into production, which you said have been out since, I think it was January 31st, I think was the date.
That's correct.
you would go through the necessary steps, unlike in the AOC that recently came through, that you would talk with the commission first to make sure you get everything done and check before going back into operation, correct?
Yes, I'll do whatever's required.
Okay. Those are my only questions for now. Thank you.
Other questions for the panel from commissioners? All right, seeing no further questions, Mr. Willis and Mr. Williford will let you move on, and we will turn this to commissioners for deliberations.
Thank you.
Commissioner Cross, do you want to start deliberations this time? You asked the questions.
I'd be happy to, and I'll be honest, I'm a little torn at where I'm coming down on this. And part of the reason I'm torn is the fact that LPEA has at least agreed that using the single phase proposal here potentially changes my mind. I'll be honest, one of the most frustrating things to me was when we got their fourth quarterly update previously, there had been a lot of talk coming into this about trying to work with LPEA to try and make sure that they could use the gas, because that really came out as likely the only available use of the gas other than flaring. And so we finally got something from LPEA, a proposal in terms of this is what we can do to get it going. And I know that in their update, they initially said that they went back with a counter offer to try and use a single phase because, and I can actually quote on it, it said, that in the ballpark of 5 cents per kilowatt hour, the cost to rebuild would be north of $100,000. And essentially what they said is they were going to try and look at this because the economics for Williford were going to be expensive. Not that the economics were making it completely unfeasible, but that it was going to make it expensive. And I'll be honest, I had serious concerns with that being an excuse not to accept LPEA's proposal, especially given that they just signed an administrative order on consent for failure to conduct mechanical integrity tests, for failure to notify the commission when wells came back online after being shut in, and paid north of $78,000 for failing to comply with our rules. And so the fact that it was going to take, I think in the report it said 10 plus years to try and become economical for them, and that their decision to say no to LPEA's initial proposal was purely on an economic basis, and the fact that it would take a while for it to become economical, I had serious concerns with. I feel like we've given a lot of leniency with Williford here over the years to the fact that there's been continuous flaring, even though in condition, as part of 181, this was supposed to be stopped within 6 months. And the fact that it has continued for as long as it has, I feel like is more leniency than I was comfortable with. And so admittedly, when I saw that fourth quarter report and they said, we're trying to come up with a different proposal because what we've seen thus far is not really economical for us. Again, not impossible, but it would be difficult economically, and it would take 10 plus years to really make their money back. And so I was 100% ready to say no. Hearing that LPEA has come back and said their single phase is a possibility potentially changes my mind. I'll be honest, I don't like the fact that this would take at least another year from now before this could be put into place. I do understand the need to collect revenue in order to pay for these upgrades that are going to be done for it. I'm a little hesitant still because there's still a lack of certainty. We don't have any PPA in place. We don't have any kind of as Mr. Wilford said there himself, there's probably going to be some negotiation back and forth. And my biggest concern is this is not even, oh, this might take until the second quarter or mid 2026, as he said, more likely. But if there's some negotiations, if there's some delays in building stuff, this is now going into later 2026, and it keeps getting drawn out. And so the lack of certainty still causes me concern. So again, I think I came in thinking it would definitely be a no. The fact that LPEA has said that they'd be willing to adopt a single phase makes me feel a little bit better about the variance application, but I'm still hesitant about the lack of certainty that's provided in what's being proposed.
Mr. Williford, we're in deliberations amongst commissioners. Unless you've got something really important to talk about, I'd rather keep it there, but I will recognize you briefly.
Thank you, Chairman Roberts. I just had one supplement to a comment that was made by Commissioner Cross, and that was the recent AOC, which was approved by the commission several weeks ago now, dealing with an MIT at a well. Economics are always a concern for Williford and its operations. The settlement document required $5,000 in payment, with also an agreement that there be the plugging of one well in the field, which we've already nominated, and that's the Die Hard well. So I just wanted to at least have the record be consistent with what was related in the AOC. Thank you. Nothing further.
All right, thank you. We'll move back to deliberations amongst commissioners. Commissioner Cross, thanks for initiating deliberations. Other commissioners with deliberative thoughts? Commissioner Messner?
Thanks, Commissioner Cross, for kicking us off there. So I guess I think a couple of things on this one. One, I think the operator has demonstrated, in my opinion, substantial compliance towards making efforts to develop beneficial use for the gas that's been identified. And it has been a number of years, and that certainly is a bit of cause of concern for me. But the most recent update that their local electricity provider does have a path forward, I think is a real positive. It does, like Commissioner Cross, give me heartburn to hear that there's negotiations associated with counter proposals on what is an opportunity for a path forward here. And so from my perspective, seeing no other viable alternative, I would hope that this operator take this opportunity seriously and make efforts towards developing this, not play a game of negotiation with an electric provider that really does no obligation to provide a path forward for this operator. And so, I think, and so having said that, and actually having seen some compliance towards a possible solution here, I see some benefit to allowing for the granting of a variance to see a completion to this process that's been ongoing for some amount of time. And so that's one hand. On the other hand, I guess I'm struggling a little bit with the director's recommendation and the suggestion, both by the applicant and the information provided in the director's recommendation, that there's some consideration for a de minimis amount of flaring or venting that would be allowed as part of the rules that have been promulgated, and wouldn't cause a problem with the basic intents of the act. And so I don't think bringing economic or technical feasibility into a determination of whether or not a variance should be allowed for flaring and venting is appropriate. I don't think that there's I think it would be problematic for this commission to come to some sort of conclusion as to what level a de minimis amount would be in determining whether or not to allow flaring or venting. I think the statute and the act are pretty clear as far as how that's presented. And so from that perspective, I don't see a clear path forward for a variance, but in the fact that there's substantial compliance, and I do believe that the operator has met the obligations of a variance because they continue to take good faith and substantial efforts towards developing a beneficial use for that casing head gas. I do think that that is a good step forward. If that were to not come to fruition, then this is a different conversation for me. But because there is a path forward, at least it seems like there's a pretty clear path forward here from the electrical provider, and I would hope that the operator take that very seriously and grab this lifeline. I would be in support of a variance, even to December of 2026 to allow this to fully come into compliance and be able to develop the necessary agreements to secure the beneficial use of this casing head gas. I'm not sure the operator needs that, but because there's an opportunity here that's been a long time coming, I'm willing to be flexible even to that extent. But beyond that, and any arguments around de minimis use, I think violate the basic intent of the act, and so I'm not interested in those arguments. So I guess those are my initial deliberative thoughts.
Thank you, Commissioner Messner. Others with deliberative thoughts? Commissioner Ackerman?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I followed a very similar path as my fellow commissioners. I really appreciate the work that was done by staff and also the documentation that we were able to review as part of this. I followed a very similar path in that, we have explicitly stated that we are moving away from venting and flaring and in all circumstances. I feel exactly the same as Commissioner Messner and Commissioner Cross here, and I certainly am willing to move forward. I think the terminology that Commissioner Messner put out there of this being a lifeline is right on, and I really hope to see this move into fruition in the proposed time.
Thank you, Commissioner Ackerman. In the for what it's worth category, I agree with all of that. I'm seeing Commissioner Oath nodding up and down. Commissioner Oath, do you want to add anything?
Nothing substantive, Mr. Chair. I think I would just echo the comments that have already been made. I was troubled. This was my first time reviewing this variance, not having been on the commission during previous considerations, and was fairly troubled with the history here in the record, but appreciated the testimony today and the update on this being maybe one last opportunity. And so could be open to, allowing that one last opportunity to be explored fully.
All right. Any further deliberative comments? I believe the appropriate motion, and AAG Davenport, if you could visualize, is to approve the variance request as reflected in the director's recommendation. Does that sound about right? You're muted.
Thank you. Yes, Chair, that sounds appropriate to me.
All right, I would make such a motion. Do we have a second? Commissioner Messner?
So I'll second a motion. I guess I have a question though. I was looking in the director's recommendation and I don't see a timeline associated with that in the director's recommendation, unless I'm missing something. And so it seems like if we're going to grant a variance, it needs to be for some certain amount of time. I believe the applicant has asked for 12 months. I also think that, unless we want to have this in front of us before documents are signed and the opportunity for beneficial uses in place. I mean, I'm okay with 12 months, but I had suggested even out to December of 2026 to be able to cross the T's and dot the I's on actual implementation of the beneficial use. I don't know where the other commissioners are on that, but I just wanted to be clear on a timeline.
I think that's a good catch, Commissioner Cross.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Commissioner Messner. I agree that I think having some sort of timeline is appropriate. Rather than go further out, I would rather have the variance be for a shorter amount of time so we can see some sort of progress having gone on. With what we heard in the testimony, that the PPA would likely be negotiated later this year and might not be until mid 2026, could be later, and completely understand some of that with it, but I would rather have a defined period of time so we could make sure that we're seeing progress made rather than getting to late 2026 and still nothing be done.
Do you have a end date in mind, Commissioner?
I think given that the variance initially, my initial thought was given that the variance was initially ended at the end of January to do 12 months from there, but I would be up for considering 12 months from today as well to get something, make sure that something's getting done. I would hope that at least by the end of January 2026, we're seeing progress made in the PPA as well as in some of the construction of the equipment for the single phase.
Commissioner Messner, do you have thoughts?
Yeah, I think that's fine. The applicant asked for 12 months, and so if that's where we want to land, I'm comfortable with that.
Hey, AG Davenport, do you want to amend the motion?
Happy to, Chair. Thank you, Commissioner Messner. I think the motion is to approve the amended application as in accordance with the director's recommendation, with the additional requirement that the variance will last for 12 months from today.
All right, consider the motion so amended. Do we have a second on the amended motion?
Second.
Motion and a second. Is there further discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. That concludes the agenda business for today. Mr. Willis, thank you very much for the presentation. We'll see you in a year, and we wish you all the best for you and for your clients' work with LPEA.
Thank you, Chairman.
Anything else for the good of the cause? Move to adjourn.
Second.
Motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Thank you very much.